During the hyperspace journey from Scarif to Tatooine, Ahsoka reflected on the dark but familiar presence she had sensed just before leaving. With Barriss gone, the entire ranks of the Inquisitorius had been depleted. This could only be Darth Vader, the Sith Obi-Wan had told her killed Anakin, and the new apprentice of Sidious. But this did not explain the familiarity she felt in his presence. Could it be possible Darth Vader was a Jedi she once knew? Luke and Leia noticed how Ahsoka was troubled, and asked her what was going on, but she brushed it off. Suddenly, the ship was rocked with a turbo blaster. The Tantive had been followed to Tatooine by a Star Destroyer. Although Captain Antilles thought the craft could outrun the capital ship, Ahsoka would not take any chances with the plans. Ahsoka entrusted the plans with R2-D2 and C-3PO, who were sent down to the planet in the midst of the battle. They were ordered to bring the plans to Obi-Wan Kenobi, who Ahsoka knew would recognize them and keep them safe. As they did this, the Devastator overtook the Tantive and tractor-beamed the ship into its lower hangar bay. The rebel soldiers took up positions to protect their valuable Jedi allies. However, their resistance was ineffective, and stormtroopers quickly began overrunning the ship. After deflecting some blaster bolts, Ahsoka and the twins hid in the service hallways to evade detection. It was at this moment that a chill came over them, and they sensed Darth Vader board the ship. Ahsoka encouraged the twins to keep moving towards the escape pod bay, but did not follow them. Ahsoka sealed herself behind a blast door, to the shock of Luke and Leia.
Ahsoka!
What are you doing?
Kids, it's gonna be okay. Vader sensed me. He has no idea about you two. Now go. Get to an escape pod.
What do you mean?
I have to protect you. This is the only way I can. Get to the surface. Find Obi-Wan. Don't wait for me. And don't try to save me until you've gotten those plans where they need to be. Vader. He can't know about you.
Come on, open the door. We can all make it.
He'll follow.
Mom!
Go!
Leia stood close to the door, listening to the fighting on the other side. After a few moments, Luke tugged at her hand to pull her away so they could get to an escape pod. Together, they got in and rocketed away from the Star Destroyer. On the Devastator, gunners noticed the escape pod.
There goes another one.
With life signs aboard, the gunner fired at the craft and made a glancing blow. This damaged but did not destroy the pod. Luke and Leia were thrown around inside as it careened uncontrollably towards the surface of Tatooine. They would be far away from their droid friends when they landed. Meanwhile, on the Tantive, Ahsoka found herself overwhelmed by the stormtroopers. Vader had ordered the Jedi he sensed captured alive, so the troopers had set their blasters to stun. Ahsoka was cornered and unable to continue fighting, so she dropped her lightsabers and allowed herself to be captured. She was put in binders and brought before Darth Vader. Vader had just heard that the Death Star plans were not in the Tantive's main computer. Upon seeing Ahsoka, the Sith Lord paused briefly. He had been sensing her through the Force this whole time, but seeing her personally was an entirely different matter. He had suspected, or perhaps hoped, she had somehow survived Order 66. But the first sister, Barriss, had never turned up any evidence of her survival. He had no way of knowing her fate until now. Ahsoka felt similarly about coming face to face with her master's supposed killer. It was a meeting she had been dreading the moment she found out about Anakin's death on Polis Massa many years ago. She had spent time wondering how it might go, but there was something else about Vader that she couldn't account for, that familiar feeling she had sensed above Scarif. What was it?
Darth Vader. So, you're the one that killed my master.
Interesting that you allowed yourself to be captured. I assumed you had perished with all the other Jedi, despite what others had claimed.
You assumed wrong. The first sister was right, but you don't have to worry about her gloating. I just watched her die. And I'm not a Jedi.
You are but a rebel and a traitor.
Exactly.
Several transmissions were beamed to the ship by rebel spies. I want to know what happened to the plans they sent you.
This ship has received no transmissions. And even if we had, I would sooner die than tell you.
Take her away!
Following this conversation, Vader would hear of the escape pod that was detected, carrying 2 life forms.
Lord Vader, the battle station plans are not aboard this ship, and no transmissions were made. An escape pod was jettisoned during the fighting, but no life forms were aboard.
She must have hidden the plans in the escape pod. Send a detachment down to retrieve them. See to it personally, Commander. There'll be no one to stop us this time.
Yes, sir.
Landing parties were sent to the surface to search for the travelers. Vader, on the other hand, did not return to Tatooine, instead traveling to the Death Star to properly interrogate Ahsoka. On the surface, R2-D2 and C-3PO would follow the same series of events as in the original film. Shortly after crashing on Tatooine, they would split up, only to be captured by the same Jawa sandcrawler. Meanwhile, Luke and Leia would stumble out of their crashed pod into the Tatooine wilderness. Luke and Leia would try to look into the Force to find Obi-Wan, but were too distracted. Instead, they moved toward a rock formation on the horizon to try to get a better vantage point and hopefully find a settlement. Having never been on Tatooine before, the twins would have a hard time adapting to the environment and would have trouble rationing their water. Eventually, they would be forced to sleep on the sand during the night. Leia would find it difficult to sleep. She was imagining, or perhaps seeing, what Vader was going to do to the woman that had taken care of her since she was born. Resuming their trek in the morning, they arrived at the rocks where they encountered banthas. Suddenly, the twins were attacked by the Tusken Raiders native to Tatooine and were quickly surrounded by them. Luke and Leia drew their blades and defended themselves against their attackers. Although they pushed them back, the Tuskens began firing their cycler rifles at the twins, forcing them to seek cover and dodge the bullets. Pinned down, the sound of a crate dragon's roar echoed throughout the canyon. The Tuskens fled, while Luke and Leia looked around, confused. Soon, they saw a cloaked figure approaching them and could quickly sense it was their old friend and occasional mentor, Obi-Wan. He remarked that they had grown since he last saw them. The twins hugged Obi-Wan and asked how he was able to survive, but he brushed this off because it was not as important as their current situation. Obi-Wan then guided the twins to his house on Tatooine. After eating and drinking, the twins gave Obi-Wan a full explanation. The daughter of an Imperial scientist had informed the rebellion of an Imperial superweapon, which she then stole the plans of. Ahsoka had loaded the plans into R2-D2 before she was captured. Now they had to find the droids and bring the plans to the rebellion, but also had to save their mother.
We need to get those plans to the rebellion as soon as possible. What about Ahsoka? We'll find her after we complete the mission. She'll understand.
No, we need to save her now.
Leia, she told us—
I don't care what she told us. Something terrible is going to happen to her.
How do you know?
Leia didn't want to reveal what Barriss had said to her in their final encounter, but she suspected the reason why Barriss was pleased by the future she saw was that it proved her right. Leia wouldn't be able to protect her mother.
She's being held by Vader, Luke. You think she's going to be fine? We need to save her.
Obi-Wan seemed to recognize something in Leia when she said that.
Perhaps we should save her first. Are you sure, Master Kenobi? Yes. I care for her as much as you do. Believe me. And I'd hate to see her lost as so many others have been.
Both Luke and Leia's faces darkened at the prospect of Ahsoka dying.
Luke, you and I are already capable of so much. With the help of Master Kenobi, what can't we do?
All right. We save Ahsoka. We deliver the plans. Let's get started.
Obi-Wan understood their feelings, although he was wary of the attachment they had interfering with their mission. Regardless, he encouraged the twins to meditate on where their mother could be. Sitting opposite one another, Luke and Leia reached out through the Force to try to find Ahsoka. Eventually, they came up with a planet, Alderaan. But why there? Ahsoka wouldn't be kept there. Silently, Obi-Wan feared his close ally, Bail Organa, might have been exposed. Across the galaxy, the Devastator arrived at the Empire's terrifying new weapon. Deep within the prison blocks, Darth Vader took it upon himself to interrogate the Jedi-trained prisoner. No one else would be qualified. However, he had no luck so far. Ahsoka's training made her resistant to all forms of interrogation. She had the ability to control pain response, and was mentally disciplined to be resistant to any kind of mind probe. Ahsoka was exhausted and exasperated when her captor began to speak to her again.
We need not be adversaries. The Empire will show you mercy if you can tell us what you did with those plans.
Just give up already. My master taught me not to give in to torture or temptation. Nothing you do will work.
Anakin gave in to me. In time, so will you.
Ahsoka shut her eyes as Vader confirmed he had indeed killed Anakin.
If you had been on Coruscant then, it may not have been so easy for me.
I couldn't be there. There was something I had to do.
More important than your master?
I didn't know.
He had nothing but a good luck wish from you. Look what it did for him.
Ahsoka shut her eyes, more tightly this time. Then, Vader held his hand up to her head, reaching into her mind. This surprised Ahsoka, remembering something Mace Windu told her and her master during the Clone Wars, that forced mental manipulation with the Force could destroy someone's mind.
Tell me what you did with those plans.
Ahsoka shut her eyes tightly and gritted her teeth.
Tell me who you sent to the surface of Tatooine.
She began to shudder and twist in discomfort.
You will tell me the location of the rebel base.
Ahsoka's screams echoed down the corridors of the cell blocks and across the Force, her adopted children, pushing them to save her as soon as possible. Before Luke, Leia, and Obi-Wan could set off for Alderaan, the party needed their droids. Having spent 2 to 3 years on Tatooine, Obi-Wan was sure the roaming droids would have been taken by the Jawas. Together, he and the twins met up with the Jawa Sandcrawler and successfully bargained for R2 and C-3PO. Then they made their way to the dangerous spaceport at Mos Eisley. Mos Eisley was filled with Imperial checkpoints, looking for the 2 humans that had been detected in the escape pod. However, the combined mental strength of Luke, Leia, and Ben easily overpowered the mind of the average TK trooper. Ben and the twins went into the Mos Eisley cantina, while the droids were forced to stay outside. Luke and Leia took seats at the bar, while Ben chatted up the various space captains hanging around. Suddenly, Luke was accosted by an Aqualish and his human friend. Luke turned away, not wanting trouble.
He doesn't like you.
I'm sorry.
Hey, back off.
I don't like you either. You just watch yourself. We're wanted men. I have the death sentence on 12 systems.
Then why are you yelling that in a cantina filled with bounty hunters?
You'll be dead.
Obi-Wan glanced over, but left the situation in the capable hands of his young companions.
Calm down. I'll get you something.
The man yelled and threw Luke to the side, before the Aqualish brandished his blaster at Leia. She quickly drew her blade and cut off the Aqualish's arm, much to the surprise and shock of the cantina clientele. This did not last long, as they soon went back to their drinks. Obi-Wan introduced Luke and Leia to Chewbacca, someone who had known Ahsoka during the Clone Wars, and who was first mate on a ship that could suit them. Chewbacca was saved by Ahsoka from being hunted for sport in Season 3 of the Clone Wars, and owed her ever since. Obi-Wan explained to him that the Jedi children were cared for by her, and that she was in danger, and needed him to repay the life debt. Chewbacca brought the group over to his captain. Ben negotiated with the captain, who introduced himself as Han Solo. Although Han initially demanded more credits than they had, Ben was able to convince him with an initial payment equal to the value of his now useless speeder, plus more when they arrived on Alderaan. Chewie also convinced Han to lower the price because of his light debt he owed to Ahsoka. Han was resistant, but he knew the importance of the life debt since Chewie owed him one himself. Han then alerted the twins that someone had noticed their handiwork. They looked to see that stormtroopers had arrived and were checking around the cantina. Quickly, Ben, Luke, and Leia left. After they passed Han and Chewie's booth, Han sent Chewie to get the Falcon ready while he dealt with Greedo. The heroic party split up as they walked across town to Docking Bay 94 to try to throw off the Imperial patrols. Despite this, they were still noticed by the Imperial spy Garindin. When they boarded the ship, they were ambushed by a squad of stormtroopers. Han and Chewie quickly started up the ship and took off. Han's promise that the Falcon could evade an Imperial Star Destroyer paid off, as the ship traveled into hyperspace on a course for Alderaan. On the Death Star, Vader informed Tarkin that despite his best efforts, the prisoner would still not divulge anything. Despite Vader's powerful reputation, Tarkin suspected he had gone easy on the prisoner because of his former connection to her. Tarkin was aware that Anakin and Darth Vader were the same person, as Vader freely admitted to Tarkin later on that Obi-Wan was once his master.
He is here.
Obi-Wan Kenobi? What makes you think so?
A tremor in the Force. The last time I felt it was in the presence of my old master.
Surely he must be dead by now.
This goes along with how Grand Moff had authority over Vader in Episode 4. Tarkin decided on an alternate form of persuasion, to play on Ahsoka's selfless Jedi beliefs instead.
Perhaps she would respond to an alternative form of persuasion.
When a still dazed Ahsoka was brought to the command center of the Death Star, she was only mildly surprised to see her old acquaintance and adversary, Admiral Tarkin, although now he was a Grand Moff.
Tarkin. I'm really coming to regret not throwing you into sulfurous lava when we first met.
Captain!
If I can't have the information, it will die with you! My thanks, Padawan Tano.
Charming to the last. You don't know how hard I found it signing the order to terminate your life?
Really? You seemed enthusiastic about it 20 years ago.
Before your execution, I would like you to be my guest at a ceremony that will make this battle station operational. No star system will dare oppose the Emperor now.
The more you tighten your grip, Tarkin, the more star systems will slip through your fingers.
Not after we demonstrate the power of this station.
Tarkin explained that he would only need to use the Death Star once, and the fear it would instill would be the Empire's greatest defense. Tarkin selected the planet Alderaan, home of the Rebellion's secret ally, Bail Organa, to test the full destructive power of the Death Star. It is strongly implied in the Leia novel that Tarkin had already suspected rebel activity on Alderaan. Moreover, in the canonical Episode 4, Darth Vader correctly accused Leia's mercy missions of being rebel operations, as shown in Star Wars Rebels. In this timeline, those missions would be handled by Senator Organa personally. When Ahsoka showed shock at how many innocents Tarkin would be murdering, he offered her the choice of providing the location of the rebels' hidden fortress to be destroyed instead. After a few moments of deliberation, Ahsoka gave out the decoy location of Tatooine. Much to her dismay, Tarkin carried on with his original plan and blew up Alderaan anyway. Ahsoka was helpless to stop it. As this happened, Obi-Wan was finally getting around to explaining the circumstances of his survival to Luke and Leia, the strange time loop that the World Between Worlds created, ensuring his survival on Malachor and exile to Tatooine, where he was able to defeat Maul for the last time. Afterwards, he made a vague remark about receiving special training there. Luke and Leia first knew of Maul after speaking with Ezra and Kanan following the Malachor mission. When they asked Ahsoka about him, she had been reluctant to tell them due to their actions following Order 66. Had she not freed Maul, many of Rex's comrades would still be alive, and Kanan would not have been blinded. After Obi-Wan finished his story, Han made a remark brushing off his whole tale as wizard nonsense. This slightly offended the Jedi in the room. Before Obi-Wan could retort with something clever, he suddenly clutched at his chest and sat down.
I felt it too. It was like millions of voices cried out in terror and was suddenly silenced.
The Death Star. The Empire must have used it again.
Han asked what the Death Star was, but the others refused to tell him since he didn't need to know. Leia stormed off, deeply angered by this. Obi-Wan followed her to a quiet part of the Falcon to talk. When Leia saw him, she averted her eyes.
You're like your parents, you know. Neither of them were any good at hiding their emotions. What's wrong?
Isn't it obvious? The Empire just destroyed a whole planet, murdering millions.
It's more than that. You're taking it personally. Why?
Leia paused.
We chose to go save Mom, Ahsoka, before bringing the plans to Yavin. That was a mistake. We should have gone to the rebellion. Then they could have stopped the Empire before they did this.
You know that's not true. There was no way we could have gotten there that fast.
I know. But what if it happens again? How many people are going to die because we're taking our sweet time? I want to save Ahsoka, more than anything. But I never thought I'd be torn between my love for her and my duty to the rebellion and the rest of the galaxy to stop the Empire. I'm scared for my mother, Master Kenobi. And I'm angry at the Empire for what they did to Jedha and this new planet. What they're doing to Ahsoka. What they could do to her.
Is there something you're not telling me?
Before we got called to Scarif, we fought the First Sister again. She told me I wouldn't be able to save Ahsoka. She said she saw my future, and she smiled. I can't stop imagining what she could have seen happening to her.
I thought it might be something like that. It's perfectly natural for you to feel that way.
I know that.
I'm glad you do. There's something I haven't told you either.
Leia looked at him with curiosity.
Over 20 years ago now, your father was very concerned about his own mother. Her being tortured. Even killed. The Jedi Order frowned upon the kind of attachment he had for his mother. So I forbade him from seeking her out and saving her. I thought the premonitions he had were just nightmares. I was wrong. When Anakin finally had the opportunity to go behind my back and find her, it was too late. She died in his arms.
Leia looked scared. She imagined the same thing happening to her.
I don't think he was the same after that. I don't want that to happen to you. That's why I made the decision to save your mother first.
Oh, thank you for understanding, Master.
Obi-Wan nodded, smiling at her. They both felt a little better about the coming mission. Before they could continue, they heard Luke yelling for them to come to the cockpit. Meanwhile, Vader and Tarkin were in the Death Star conference room.
Yes?
Our scout ships have reached Tatooine. They found the remains of a rebel base, but they estimate that it has been deserted for some time. They are now conducting an extensive search of the surrounding systems.
She lied. She lied to us.
I told you she would never consciously betray the rebellion.
Terminate her, immediately.
Darth Vader would object to this course of action. Although he had become a ruthless Sith Lord, he still had a soft spot for his old apprentice, and felt a responsibility to protect her. Furthermore, although he was now friends with the Grand Moff, the two of them had always ignored the one issue that came between them, Ahsoka Tano. Remember, Tarkin knew of Vader's true identity. During the Clone Wars, Tarkin was the prosecutor at Ahsoka's trial, and tried to give her the death penalty. Although Tarkin would have told Anakin he was sorry, he was mistaken after Anakin proved Ahsoka was framed. Anakin had not forgiven him. Tarkin would immediately understand why Vader was suddenly protective of the prisoner, despite torturing her for information before. When he threatened to tell the Emperor about this, Vader backed off. He was still angry at Tarkin. When the Millennium Falcon arrived, Obi-Wan, Han, and Chewbacca were in awe of what they saw. Leia's heart sunk. It was the Death Star. The planet it had destroyed was Alderaan. That was why they had sensed it before. Han was more than mildly frightened to find out this is what had just silenced millions of screams. Luke told Han to leave the system as fast as possible so they could make the journey to the rebel base and report what happened. Unfortunately, Han and Chewie soon lost control of the Falcon as it was seized by the Death Star's tractor beam. Similar to the canonical movie, the Falcon was dragged onto the Death Star. The passengers of the Falcon hid from the Imperial scanners, but Darth Vader still unexpectedly sensed his old master, a presence he had not felt since Obi-Wan had suddenly disappeared in front of him on Malachor.
I sense something, a presence I've not felt since...
Luke, Leia, and Han donned stormtrooper disguises and took the control room, where Obi-Wan split up with the group to shut down the tractor beams. The main group of characters set off to the cell blocks to rescue Ahsoka, leaving the droids behind before they left. Han asked Leia if she might be a little short for a stormtrooper. She brushed him off. When they came upon the prison blocks, Han and Chewie anticipated their cover being blown when the warden went to clear the supposed prisoner transfer. He was surprised. Then, when Luke used the Force to make him believe there was no need to clear it, Leia then used the Jedi mind trick on the other guards to make them forget what they just saw. Luke and Leia went right into the cell as soon as the door opened. This time, both of them cried out, "Mom," as they hugged her tightly.
Leia, Luke, you shouldn't be here, but I am glad to see you. We need to get moving.
The whole group easily left the cell block using their mental powers and passed off Ahsoka as another prisoner being escorted using a second pair of binders. However, their deception was quickly noticed as they traveled through the maze-like corridors of the Death Star. The group split up. Luke and Leia leapt their way across a chasm. Han and Chewie charged at some troopers, and Ahsoka found her way to where her lightsabers were being kept after they were confiscated. Vader did not have them destroyed immediately, as he wanted to keep something of his old apprentice, which Ahsoka was not aware of. She found her sabers by sensing where the living kyber crystals were through the Force. Elsewhere, Obi-Wan was able to surreptitiously shut down the tractor beam generator. As he made his way back, he was met in an empty hallway by Darth Vader himself. The two coldly greeted each other before once again igniting the duel between them that had begun almost 20 years ago on Mustafar.
Your powers are weak, old man.
You can't win, Darth. If you'll strike me down, I'll become more powerful than you could possibly imagine.
All groups, including the droids, arrived at the landing bay and made their way over to the Falcon. Before Luke, Leia, and Ahsoka made their way to the ramp, they noticed that Obi-Wan and Vader were dueling at the entrance to the hangar. They stood transfixed as Obi-Wan raised his saber in front of him, a look of resignation on his face, before he was cut down by Vader. But Vader's saber never hit anything. Obi-Wan had vanished. All that remained were his empty robes. Luke and Leia screamed, "No!" Vader and the stormtroopers that were spectating the duel turned to look at the Falcon and the rebels boarding. Immediately, the stormtroopers sprung into action, initiating a firefight. Ahsoka and Luke took out their lightsabers to defend themselves, and Han began firing back. But Leia was frozen in place. Luke tried to tug on her shoulder to get inside, but she could not stop staring at Vader. The blast doors to the bay closed, and Leia heard the disembodied voice of Obi-Wan.
"Run, Leia, run!"
This finally spurred Leia to get on board the Falcon, and the ship soon took off. When it did, Leia and Luke consoled each other about Obi-Wan's sudden death.
I can't believe he's gone. Again.
There was nothing we could have done.
Leia expressed a desire for revenge against Vader. Luke told her that she should not let her emotions control her, which she could not accept. How could she not? Leia said that Vader killed their parents when they were just kids, tortured Ahsoka, blew up Alderaan, and then killed Obi-Wan right in front of them. Didn't he deserve death? Ahsoka told Leia that the kind of anger she was exhibiting would get her nowhere closer to taking Vader down. There would be a time to avenge Obi-Wan, but now they had their mission in service of the rebellion. Silently, Ahsoka too mourned the loss of Obi-Wan. One of her last friends from the Clone Wars left. She wished she could have spoken with Obi-Wan about Vader, and asked why Vader felt familiar to her. From this point onward, the story follows the beats of the canonical story closely. Leia deduced the Falcon was being tracked, but the group took the calculated risk of drawing the Death Star to Yavin. On the jungle moon, Ahsoka saw her convor friend, Morai, watching from afar. The rebellion found the flaw in the Death Star plans left by Galen Erso, and organized attack squadrons of X-Wings and Y-Wings. Luke was assigned the call sign Red 5, as the previous Red 5 was killed in action above Scarif. Leia was assigned Red 13. Ahsoka did not participate in the battle at the request of Luke and Leia, so that she could recover from the torture she had endured on the Death Star. Han was paid for his trouble by the rebellion and parted badly with Luke and Leia. When the Death Star arrived, the rebels launched their fighter squadrons to take out the superweapon. During the ensuing spaceborne battles and dogfights, the rebel fighters were picked off one by one until only a few remained: the X-Wings of Biggs Darklighter and the Twins, and the Y-Wing of Van Verlaine. The X-Wing of Wedge Antilles was damaged earlier in the battle, and he was limping home to Yavin. Darth Vader launched his TIE Advance with 2 wingmen and joined the fight. Below on the planet Yavin, Commander Dodonna and Ahsoka looked on the tactical readouts with apprehension. During the final trench run, Luke led Leia and Biggs behind him as they raced towards the thermal exhaust port. Biggs' X-Wing was critically damaged by Vader and perished. Leia then flew side by side with Luke for the final leg of the journey. Trusting their instincts, they did not use their targeting computer the way Red Leader had attempted to. Instead, they focused on their goal and reached out through the Force for the perfect time to fire. In this state, Vader became aware of the Force sensitivity of the pilots and put together they must be the Jedi accomplices of Ahsoka that broke her out. Leia was finding it difficult to concentrate on the exhaust port and doubted she could make the shot. She couldn't stop thinking about Barris's prophecy and what Vader had done to Obi-Wan. With her distracted, Vader was able to shoot and damage her X-Wing, forcing her to peel off to recover. Vader then set his eyes on Luke, but did not anticipate what would happen next.
Look out! You're all clear, kid. Now let's blow this thing and go home.
The rebels celebrated their victory shortly afterward. Despite the loss of Obi-Wan, they had saved the galaxy from the terror of the Death Star. This concludes part 4 of What If Ahsoka Raised Luke and Leia. The adventure's not done yet, as the story will continue in part 5, during the events of The Empire Strikes Back, in this Elseworlds timeline.